A loved one breaks your trust. Why does that wound feel deeper and last longer than any physical injury? This is the dark psychological paradox of betrayal trauma, a unique injury caused by the collapse of a foundation you needed to survive. We're about to explore the mechanics of this wound that many people feel, but very few can actually name. It's an injury that doesn't bleed, but it can absolutely cripple your ability to trust yourself and the world around you. So this paradox, it's really the heart of everything we're going to talk about. The idea that an invisible wound from someone who was supposed to protect you can cause more lasting damage than, say, a broken bone, that isn't an exaggeration. It's a clinical reality. So today, we're going to unpack exactly why that is, how the mind is forced to protect itself in these really counterintuitive ways, and what the path to actually healing looks like. All right, so here's our roadmap. First, we'll tackle the paradox of betrayal. Then we'll define this as an injury of dependence. From there, we'll dive into the cycle of self-deception it creates. We'll also look at the massive conflict between survival and truth. And finally, the most important part, how to finally heal and why embracing the truth is the key. Okay, let's start with this core conflict. Most threats we face in life come from the outside, right? Our brains are wired for it, identify a danger, react, and then get to safety. But what on earth happens when the danger comes from the very person who is your safety? Well, this is the paradox that completely short-circuits all of our normal survival responses. I mean, really think about that for a second. A broken bone heals. The body knows exactly what to do. But when the betrayal comes from a parent, a spouse, or an institution you depend on, it doesn't just break a bone. It breaks your reality. It attacks the very framework you use to make sense of the world. So this isn't just an emotional thing. It's a cognitive and, frankly, an existential injury. And that's exactly why it's so profoundly debilitating. So to really get this, we need to be specific. See, not all betrayals are the same. A stranger lying to you, that's annoying. But a spouse you depend on, financially, emotionally, lying to you, that's just shattering. The difference is the stakes. And that leads us to a much more formal definition. And right here, this is the crucial part. This term, which was first coined by psychologist Jennifer Freyd, it all hinges on one single word: dependence. The trauma isn't just about the betrayal itself. No, it's about the betrayal happening inside a relationship that is essential for your survival, whether that's physical, emotional, or financial survival. That context, it changes everything about how your brain is forced to process what happened. This principle right here explains so much. If your dependence on the person who betrayed you is total, like a child relying on a parent, the potential for trauma is at its absolute peak. It's a brutal, simple equation. The more you need the person who hurt you, the deeper the wound. And that's because the betrayal doesn't just hurt your feelings, it literally threatens your existence. And you can see how this plays out in so many real-world situations. With childhood abuse, the dependence is 100%. The caregiver is the source of food, shelter, love. So the child's brain literally cannot compute that they're also a threat. In intimate partner violence, you might have financial dependence, kids, a deep emotional bond. And with institutions like the military or a church, a soldier relies on command for safety, a parishioner relies on their church for spiritual survival. In every case, the betrayal comes from the very source of safety and identity. So if you can't fight back and you can't run away because the source of danger is also your lifeline, what does your mind do? It adapts, it creates a defense mechanism, but this defense comes at a terrible price, creating this hidden, looping cycle of trauma that can go on for decades. Let's break down this pattern, because this is really the engine of the long-term pain. First, the violation happens. Instantly, the survival instinct kicks in, and that leads to step 2, betrayal blindness. Now, this is not a conscious choice. This is an unconscious brain function that screams, I cannot afford to see this truth right now because my world will collapse. I need this person. So the brain literally hides the truth from you to protect the attachment. And this leads to step 3, internal fragmentation. The memory isn't gone, it's just shattered. It's broken up into feelings and sensations and stored in the body outside the main story of your life. And the consequences of this are huge. Because that memory is still active, just in pieces, it's constantly leaking out. This is where you get those chronic symptoms. The memory gaps, feeling numb all the time, being hypervigilant. Your conscious mind might not remember the betrayal, but your body sure does. It's why someone might have these panic attacks out of nowhere. Deep down, your nervous system knows there's a threat it's not allowed to see, so it stays on high alert. The body remembers what the mind was forced to forget. And now we're getting to the absolute core of it. What's the psychological engine driving this whole thing? This blindness, this fragmentation? Well, it's a fundamental, unwinnable war between two of our most powerful drives: the need to survive and the need to know the truth. Just look at the profound asymmetry here. The victim's motivations are primal: preserve the attachment, ensure survival, try to make sense of an impossible situation. But the betrayer's motivations? They're often just self-serving: protect their ego, stay in control, and avoid consequences. One person is wrestling with an existential crisis while the other is often just focused on self-preservation. That mismatch is a huge part of the pain. This cognitive overload, it's the breaking point. The brain's logic circuits just can't compute the equation safety equals danger. It's a paradox that breaks all the rules of survival. So faced with this impossible problem, the conscious mind essentially shuts down. It can't solve it, so it just tables it. And that's when the trauma gets pushed down and internalized, often as shame, self-doubt, or this vague, nagging feeling that something is deeply wrong with you. This quote just sums it up perfectly. Dissonance is that awful feeling of holding two completely opposite beliefs at the same time. My partner loves me, and my partner hurts me. Both feel true, but they can't logically coexist. This is the excruciating mental state that betrayal trauma forces on a person. So, after all that, understanding the mechanism, the paradox, the pain, we get to the most important question: how do you break the cycle? If the trauma is caused by an unconscious survival tactic, then healing has to be a conscious, deliberate process. It's about taking back the pen and rewriting the story. These 3 steps are the direct antidote to that trauma pattern we talked about. First, and this is completely non-negotiable, you have to establish safety. You can't start healing while you're still being injured. This means distance, boundaries, whatever it takes for your nervous system to finally stand down. Second, conscious reality testing. This is how you fight betrayal blindness. You need an objective, outside perspective, like a good therapist, to validate your reality and say, yes, that happened, and it was not okay. That validation is a critical anchor when you've been forced to doubt yourself. And finally, integration. You actively work to shift the story away from self-blame and toward accountability, piecing the fragments back into a coherent story. And this right here is the end goal. Healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about changing its state in your mind. You're taking those shattered implicit pieces that are wreaking havoc on your nervous system and consciously putting them together into a coherent story, an explicit memory. A story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. A story that you are in control of, instead of one that controls you. So as we wrap this up, let's distill everything down to its most essential, most empowering core. This is the reframe that makes all the difference. Let's just let that sink in for a second. All the shame, the self-doubt, the years of thinking, what's wrong with me? It's all based on a misinterpretation of the pain. You didn't feel that much pain because you are weak or flawed. You felt that much pain because that relationship was that necessary for your survival. The depth of your wound is a testament to the depth of your need, not a measure of your failure. Ultimately, healing comes down to this conscious choice. The old path was about survival, and you know what? It worked. That strategy of self-deception kept you alive in an impossible situation. But that path has a cost. The new path, the path to healing, means trading that old strategy for a new one. It means choosing to build your safety on a foundation of truth, even when that truth is incredibly painful to face. So let's bring this all into focus. Betrayal trauma hurts so much for one devastatingly simple reason. The injury happened inside a bond that was essential for your survival. The wound didn't come from an enemy you could fight or a stranger you could run from. It came from your source of safety. That absolute dependence forces the mind into a corner, activating that unconscious defense of betrayal blindness. And it's that refusal to see, which was a survival strategy at the time, that causes the trauma to stay active and unresolved through internal fragmentation. The wound was never allowed to heal because, for a time, it couldn't even be looked at. But the path to healing breaks that loop. By establishing safety, by engaging in conscious reality testing, and by integrating the truth, you reverse the whole process. You give your mind permission to finally see what your body has known all along. The confusion, the memory gaps, the self-doubt, they weren't a sign of your weakness. They were a sign of your mind's incredible, desperate attempt to protect you. Your perception was never the problem. The betrayal was.